Hello, welcome back to Kunu's Corner. Today we're going to be going over another easy FPS editor tutorial. Today we're going to be going over weapon FSM and adding a reload animation to your weapon. So first and foremost, we should know where we keep our FSM files. They're known as state files. So you're going to want to open up your project folder and you'll see there's a bunch of different file folders here. You got fonts, HUD, maps, menu, models, music, scripts, shaders, skyboxes, sounds, sprites, states, system, textures, titles, and voices. We're going to keep our states in our states folder. That's pretty obvious. So it's good to know where that's located. And to actually write our state file, I'm going to use a program called SC554. It looks like this. It's a free program. I just find it really useful because it has a lot of settings. You could use Notepad, you could use Notepad++, you could use really any program, but I'm going to be using SC554 today. So we're going to want to start with locating our assets. Let's grab all of our sprites for our reload. So I'm going to be using, just like last episode, some assets from my game named Call the Exterminator that I'm working on right now in Easy FPS Editor. If you want to check my progress on that, you can head over to the channel. I got tons of videos from start to finish. Well, not finish, well, from start to really where I'm at now, and all the way up until I finish, I'll keep uploading videos. So you can go ahead and check the progress there. So I got my M16. Remember, it starts as 0, so 0 is your pickup, and I got 0 all the way through 52. Let's grab those and drop them in our project. Let's head to sprites, weapons, and we'll drop those in there. Alright, so now that you have your sprites in your project folder, let's open up our program of choice and let's get started. So it's also very helpful when you're doing your FSM to open your project and have your sprites just side by side so you can reference the frames. Because when you're doing the reload, you want to know when the reload animation actually starts. Okay, so to get started here, we need to tell Easy FPS Editor what image we want to pull, or rather what collection of images. So we're going to type image space, mine is called M16, so I'm going to type M16, starts at frame 0, and it ends at frame 52. Alright, so that's all we have to do to tell Easy FPS Editor our collection of images. Now we're going to move on to sounds. So if you remember the last episode when we added our weapon without FSM, we still added a fire sound. So when we do our FSM, if we don't reference the sound, it's not going to pull it. So we need to type sound just like image, and it was M16 fire. Now remember, our sound files are .wave. However, you'll notice just like with the image, we don't need to type the extension. We don't need to type .wave. Alright, so we have that, and so far that's all we need for the images and sounds, and we can move on to the actual states. So there's a couple states that are going to be in every weapon FSM pretty much, and that's going to be idle, attack, and reload. So we'll start with our idle. So we're going to type state in lowercase, space, and then idle in all caps, and then none with a 0. I'm pretty sure this 0 has something to do with 3D models. However, since we're using sprites, we'll just keep it as 0. I'm really not 100% sure on that, so if someone has a real answer on that, you can correct me in the comments, but if I find out later on, I'll always correct myself. And how this works is we're saying our first state is the idle state, and then after we go to the idle state, we're not going to jump to another state. So we're basically going to loop the idle state. Now we get into telling Easy FPS Editor what frame of our animation we want to display and when. So we're going to start with frame 1, and then this is when you put your frame delay, like how long the frame is displayed. So I'm just going to go with 0.01, and then we have our X, Y, Z offsets. So we'll do 0, 0, 0, and none. So one really important thing to know about writing FSM in Easy FPS Editor is the first line of every state has to be a none command, right? There's just something about it. You cannot put a command, let's say, like attack or reload or spawn. You couldn't put any of those commands on the first line. It's going to break your FSM. So we always need to have none. Now if you're using the latest Alpha Build 46, there's 0 frame time delay. So that's really nifty because let's say we want to have a command basically happen immediately in this state, but there's always this arbitrary frame that we have to display, right? But in Alpha 46, there's 0 frame time delay. So you could put a 0, and effectively what happens is it's going to jump right to that first one and it's going to skip it. In older versions, that's not possible. It would just break your FSM, but now that works. So that's really nifty when writing like enemy FSM and other things to make it more snappy. But for simplicity and making sure this works on everybody's system, because I don't know which version you're using, we're just going to go with 0.01. And also, since this is the idle, we really don't have to have a lot going on here. So I really just want to display these frames quickly because it's going to be on a constant loop. Then another thing, we need to have a ready command, and this is basically telling Easy FPS Editor when you're ready to attack. Alright, so there we have our idle state, and we can get into the attack state. So let's go state attack, and then we want to loop back to the idle after we attack. And then we got that 0. So now let's see what our frames are. I want to reference those real quick. So it looks like 1 through 14 are my attack. So what you can do to make this quick is just take a frame, paste it, then I'm just going to go back in and edit those frame numbers. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And since we have to display that arbitrary frame, you know, I was going to double it, but I think that's actually okay. So we'll put our ready at the end. And I really want to see with my animation frames, where's the muzzle flash most predominant. Looks like the 3rd frame, so I'm going to put my attack there. Now there's several ways that you can actually do the attack to save lines. So you could just do attack and then put your sound, and it would be sound 0, and that works a lot like the animation does, how it starts at frame 0. When we're counting these in FSM, we're counting them starting at 0. So if we had 2 sounds, I doubled it, and now I wanted to play this second sound, it would be sound 1, right? So anyway, we could do attack and then sound, and we have a muzzle flash, so we want that muzzle flash. That basically lights up the view model with the muzzle flash color that you set in Easy FPS Editor. Right, so this would work all fine and well. However, you wanted to save some lines. Let's take these away. You could go sound and attack 0. And then it's going to attack and play that sound number that you want at the same time. And you could throw a none in there, but really you could scoot your muzzle flash up. Boom. There you have it. So that's a great way to save some space there. Now, all we need to do is put our reload frames in. So we're going to write state reload. Then we want to jump back to the idle. Of course, we need that 0. And then since our attack ends on frame 14, I can assume that it begins on frame 15. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to just paste a bunch of my frames. Ooh, actually, before I do that, I think 0.01 is rather quick for a reload. So I'm going to change that to a 4, a little slower. So I'm just going to paste a bunch of these down, because for this reload, we got all the way up to frame 52. So this is a good example for you guys that want to have a lot of frames of animation for your reload, or really for anything in FSM. So that's a bunch right now. Let's just go in and start changing the numbers. 23, 24, 25. Now this is the real tedious part, but it's kind of like a fruits of the labor type thing. Once you're done with this and you get to see your reload playing back, man, is it gratifying. Now if you have any questions related to your Easy FPS Editor project, I have a Discord that you can join that will be really helpful. I'm always willing to lend a helpful hand, so if you have a Discord, feel free to join that. It's linked in my channel. So I'm on frame 49 right now. 50, 51, 52. Alright, so I have a little extra. I gave you some crust there, so let's take that off. Then we'll put our ready at the end. telling Easy FPS Editor once we're done with the reload animation, we're going to be ready to attack again. So then I'm going to reference my animation frames again. I just want to see when that magazine goes back in the gun. Looks like about frame 34, so that's where I'm going to put my reload command. You need this reload command in your reload state, or else the reload's not going to happen. So there we have it. That is really simple for the reload. That's all we need is that reload command and that ready at the end. We have all of our frames of animation in. Now we got to save it. So you're going to go back to your project folder, back to your states folder, and you're going to save it as .states. So it's going to be M16 for my weapon, .states. And it needs to have the same exact name as your frames of animation. That way it's all going to work together. So M16 states, save that. All right, now let's open up our project. All right guys, so let's try this out. Pick up our M16, fire a couple shots, and there you have it. Our reload is looking nice. All we really got to do is add some sounds in there. So it's really that simple, guys. I hope this video helped. If you want any more tutorials, let me know down below what you'd like to see, what would help. And if you have any questions related to your Easy FPS Editor project, I have a Discord linked on my channel that you can join. And yeah, I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one.